Hey! You mind if I take just one more look?
Hey. I just want to take another look at you.
Hey, Esther.
What?
I was just taking another look.
Hey.
What?
I just want to take another look at you.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maeda.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
I'm Brad Shreve.
Well, I was singing. Wait, I was going to start singing.
Go ahead.
No, we can't sing. I can't.
You can do a little bit.
This is Tony Maeda. I can't. No, I'm not going to sing it. We want people to listen, not tune off. The reason I thought about singing was because I want so badly to be able to play music for you because we're talking about A Star is Born. All of them.
A Star is Born, A Star is Born, A Star is Born, and A Star is Born. 4 Star is Borns and the real first Star is Born, though it didn't have the same title.
Right. So we're talking about that today. I think both of us have had a real Star is Born fest. I know I have, especially yesterday. I was catching up on all of them.
Some were so delightful and some, oh my God. We'll get into those. I think we'll have different opinions.
I think we will too. I think some of the things we agree on.
So let's dive in.
Do we want to talk about the genesis first of A Star is Born?
Yeah, let's start there.
Of the whole story. You know, it's such a, I don't want to say staple, but it's legendary. I mean, every time this movie gets made, it's a hit in some form or another. I mean, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, the one with Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper was probably the biggest. It's just, the story started, because it tells a story of Hollywood, it actually started way back in 1932 when David O. Selznick purchased an article by a very well-known, at the time, Hollywood columnist named Adela Rogers St. John, who wrote a lot of early interviews with movie stars in the 20s and 30s. What they bought was an article called The Truth About Hollywood. And it was really the first time Hollywood took a look at itself for all of its warts and wrinkles. And so this was purchased by David O. Selznick, who wanted to develop it into a screenplay. And the screenplay was eventually called What Price Hollywood, which is the unofficial first version of A Star is Born, starring Constance Bennett and Lowell Sherman. You know, it wasn't called A Star is Born, and the story is very, very similar to it. It's a pre-code film, which means it's before 1934, which means they can get away with a lot that they couldn't have gotten away with when the film was actually made as A Star is Born in 1937.
And I can't wait to touch on those.
On what price Hollywood or all of them?
What they were able to get away with.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You know, it's taken from the famous play What Price Glory. So What Price Hollywood? And you know, Hollywood at that time, think about it. In the early 30s, talkies had only been running the show for 5 years. 6 years. Jazz Singer was 27. So there were still so many myths already. So many myths about Hollywood and about being famous. I mean, it was already iconic, but it was a very, very, I want to say a very naive way of looking at coming to Hollywood and becoming a star.
And that's what I found fascinating. I mean, this is basically a little over 15 years after Hollywood became Hollywood, thereabouts, maybe a little bit more.
Right.
All the movie industry moved out here 1910-ish, 1915-ish. So it wasn't that long, and it instantly became this thing.
No, it wasn't. That's what's fascinating to me is that the myth of Hollywood was pretty much was so entrenched they could make a movie about it in 1932 because thousands and hundreds and millions of hopefuls came out here, by the truckload yearly to become stars because there had never been anything like this before. So even that early, even 1932, we have the myth of Hollywood solidified. And the thing that's interesting that I find interesting about What Price Hollywood is the fact that it is the embryonic version of A Star is Born, but But what we think of as A Star is Born, which is one actor going up and one actor going down, that doesn't sound right. One star being born and one star descending. In What Price Hollywood, it's an actress and a director, and there's not a romance between them. The director is actually played by Lowell Sherman. He's of questionable sexuality.
It's not questionable.
I think it's fair to say.
This is the days of the sissy.
It's very funny. It's very funny because whenever you see a pre-code movie and you see a slightly effeminate character, because God knows they all disappeared after 1934 when the code came into effect, or if they were, they were murders or they were very, very, very heavily veiled. The hints about his sexuality are really kind of interesting. It's not just his effeminate manner. I mean, he talks about all these women, yet we have never seen him with one.
Here's where I get it from. I mean, he was slightly effeminate. He wasn't as effeminate when the sissy era came, in the 30s and 40s?
Yeah, very true. He was no Franklin Pangborn, that's for sure.
No. He wasn't that, but he was definitely effeminate. He's handing out the flowers at Brown Derby. Okay, so yeah, a straight guy could hand out flowers, but he seemed a little more into it. He bumps into that woman and says, "Pardon me, sir." He realizes it's a woman and he goes, "Oh, who's your tailor?" And the first night together, Max wakes up after his drunk in bed, and Mary slept on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
And she says he didn't come on to her in a romantic way.
Right.
And she adds, "That's the first time that ever happened."
That's good. It's good that you caught that.
Yeah. I had to watch it again.
Well, there's no romance between the director and the actress. That's very true. And I think that, I don't know, it's funny because it just, when you're watching it and you have the history of all the other Stars Borns behind you and you're watching this, you're like, but wait a minute, aren't they supposed to have the romance? Because that's part of the tension. That's part of the tragedy. And it's not in What Price Hollywood. She has a romance with someone else and she gets married and that doesn't end well. Doesn't work out for her. It's just, when you're watching What Price Hollywood, it's just not formed yet. And you can see why Selznick, 5 years later, wanted to redo it and make the romance between the star that's rising and the star that's falling, because there's your tension.
Yeah.
That's what the story is. You're not only dealing with the career thing, but the love. I love What Price Hollywood. It's high up on my list if we're going to rank these. And I know you like it too.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's slow. It's not the most entertaining one to watch, but I actually think it's the best in its portrayal of the dark side of Hollywood.
The very best out of all of them.
I think hands down.
Really?
Yeah, even as dark as
oh my God,
the
really?
Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga version. I just felt it was. And I also like that Mary, who is
the star that's born. Yeah, the up-and-coming star.
Up-and-coming star. She starts as a waitress at the Brown Derby,
mm-hmm.
which I thought was fun to see the Brown Derby back then. She is not sweet and innocent like in all the other movies.
No.
She knows what she wants. And if she has...
Well, there ain't nothing sweet and innocent about Streisand. 77.
Well, that's true. But...
Yes, I know what you mean, though.
Mary, it doesn't just fall into Mary's lap. Mary is going for it.
She's a typical she's funny is she's the stereotypical blonde bombshell star. And you can see that that's the kind of star she's going to become, Mary Evans. She's going to be like a Jean Harlow.
Yes.
That's her. Well, she's Constance Bennett, and that was Constance Bennett's persona. Was that? But no, she's not. You're right. When they redid it in 1937 with Janet Gaynor, who was,
the farm girl.
Who was a farm girl. I mean, she's Janet Gaynor. Janet Gaynor won the first Academy Award in 1929, and her persona was a sweet young girl. So they changed that whole idea. I love the fact that Mary's kind of tough.
Yeah. In
What Price Hollywood. You know what I mean? She's got the quips and she's got the one-liners. What always bothers me about this, about the early Stars Borns, and this stopped in 1954 with the ultimate version, I'm sorry, just is, with Judy, is they don't show how they don't show what inspires. There's no witnessing of this talent.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the major things about the 1954 version. Was it was very important that we see Norman Maine, aka James Mason, see her stardom, see her talent.
Mm-hmm. That
would then propel him to say, you're a great talent. We don't see that in the first two. She just becomes a star. Mary Evans has that great long, she can't get the line right. about Binky not proposing to her. And she just, and she's terrible and she just rehearses it and rehearses it and rehearses it. So we have to take their word for it. We have to take their word that when she becomes a star, she's this great talent. We don't witness that. Same thing with Janet Gaynor. Janet Gaynor's running around doing impressions at this party. And that's supposed to inspire Norman Maine to think she can be a star.
Yeah.
That always seems wanting to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me as much in What Price Hollywood as it does in The Star is Born. But I love What Price Hollywood. I do. I agree with you.
And another example is so Mary gets what she wants. Her husband is a polo player. And when she first meets him, she's not all that interested. Not that she's not interested in him, but he's not going to help her in her career in any way. He's just a polo player.
Mm-hmm.
That's her attitude.
Yeah.
She wants what she wants.
You can see how superfluous that character is, though. You can see why they jettisoned him to make the romance between the two major characters, because he really is. You're kind of like, well, what do you have to do with this plot? How do you serve the plot here?
He is critical to the plot because of her redemption at the end. That's the only purpose he serves.
Yeah, I guess so. But I guess they realized we don't need you. We'll make the romance between.
He's a dull character.
Yeah, he's a dull character, and played by a pretty dull actor.
And do you know who plays him?
Yeah, but you tell me.
It is played by. Oh, wait a minute, Lowell.
No, Lowell Sherman is Max.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, it's Neil Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Who the whole time I'm watching the movie, I'm like, I know this guy's voice. It was driving me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
He was Commissioner Gordon in the 1960s Batman.
Yes.
And he looked
That's right.
so suave.
And his acting technique had not improved.
No.
It's fascinating to look at it from the hindsight of all the other Star is Borns, to see where this really started, and also see why Selznick felt impelled to take it further and streamline it. So in 1937, we have the first official Star is Born, starring Janet Gaynor and Frederick March, which pretty much set the parameters for all the Star is Borns to follow. Although I got to tell you, one of my favorite things about A Star is Born, and correct me if I'm wrong, I do think he says this in What Price. There's a famous line in every single Star is Born. In fact, I want to call the name of this episode One More Look at You, because every single character, every single Norman Maine says to Esther Blodgett, with all the names changed, calls her back, and she says, "What?" And he says, "I would just want to take another look at you." This is a through line through all the Star is Borns. Did they do it in One Price Hollywood? For some reason, I'm thinking, I can't remember.
I don't recall that. If it was done, it would not have been done in the same way, because there wouldn't be that attraction.
It's not a romantic.
Yeah, the romantic attraction.
Yeah. The 37 set the parameters for this, had that one line, which has been through every single, in some form or another. I have a lot of things to say about the Streisand version. For me, the best part of it is when she sings One More Look at You at the end of the film. That's the best part for me, but we'll get to that. But in the Lady Gaga version, he does the same thing. I just want another look at you. So that's carried through everyone. And that starts with the original script for the 1937, which was written by Dorothy Parker, the famous wit, and her husband, Alan Campbell, directed by William Wellman. So that's set in it. The very famous ending of This is Mrs. Norman Maine began with the 37 Star is Born.
Yep.
And it's carried through, again, Streisand had to play with it a little bit, but there's still, the essence is still acknowledging the loss of the husband by saying, "This is Mrs. Norman Maine," which is very moving, particularly in the Garland version.
Tony, I'm stopping our conversation real quick.
Why? Brett, we're in the middle of a podcast.
But this is about the podcast, and it's very important.
Okay.
Listener, whatever app you're listening on, whether it's on the computer or on the phone, reach your finger or your mouse over. It usually says follow. Some still say subscribe. And click that. And what's going to happen when they do that, Tony?
They're going to get notified when a new episode is available, and they can listen to us again. You don't want to miss that.
No.
Can we get back to the episode that we were recording?
Of course.
Please?
Of course.
All right. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe and follow.
There you go. I do want to make one more mention of What Price Hollywood before we move on.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
In 1937, RKO Pictures considered a lawsuit against Selznick because they plagiarized the story.
Right.
And they backed down because they thought there were enough differences that they would lose.
Right.
I don't know if they would. I mean, there are definitely differences, but yeah, come on, it's the same damn story.
Well, it's the thrust is the same. I mean, the bones of it are the same.
But RKO Pictures was pretty small at that time, so they probably didn't have the money.
Well, Selznick was pretty small too. I mean, he wasn't small, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, true.
But it's interesting because Selznick's the one who started it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he left RKO to form Selznick International Pictures. So his former company's coming back and saying, we're suing you for this story which you had originally brought to us. So the 37, again, picks up the basic bones of What Price Hollywood and streamlines it and makes it a little... it puts in the basic tenets of the Star is Born plot that we know. For instance, there's always a scene in a sanitarium.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a moment. Well, I don't think there is I take that back. There's not one in the Streisand version. He doesn't go to rehab, which really surprises me because he needs to go to rehab.
Oh, God, he needed rehab from the first minute.
But there's usually a scene which is actually inspired by a real life scene. So George Cukor was the original director of What Price Hollywood. He directed What Price Hollywood. And he was very close with David O. Selznick. And he told a story of visiting John Barrymore at a sanatorium when he was drying out. And that story very much inspired the scene in A Star is Born where Norman Main's in the sanatorium drying out. So there's that scene, which is pretty much a staple of it. There's always these staple scenes, and they all began with the 1937 Star is Born.
One interesting thing about George Cukor, he directed What Price Hollywood, and he was asked to direct the 1937 A Star is Born, and he declined because he said they were too similar. But then he turned around, he did the 54 version, which is very funny.
Yeah, but the 54, well, we'll get to the 54.
What was your opinion of this movie?
37? Mm-hmm. I'm not crazy about it. It's funny because when you come to it, the first one I ever saw was Judy's, was the 54 version. So it's really hard to see any other version and have a warm reaction to it. I think that it's a great movie of its time.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that we get these benchmarks in the plot of A Star is Born, such as One More Look at You and such as This is Mrs. Norman Maine. I love that. I'm not crazy about Janet Gaynor. I'm much more impressed with Frederick March in this.
Oh, I'm the opposite.
Really? You like Janet Gaynor better?
I hated Frederick March in this. I thought he was a horrible actor.
Oh.
And he does not know, playing a drunk is not easy.
He plays a drunk, but he's played a drunk a lot in his career, so I don't know about that.
He failed miserably as he just looked like a confused man. And I'll tell you what really highlighted it was the scene at the courtroom
mm-hmm.
when he and the other drunks are taken there before the judge.
Mm-hmm.
The other guys played drunks really well.
Yeah.
And he just looked ridiculous. He just didn't fit the mold. I didn't like his character at all.
Well, we're going to have to...
Tell you, my feeling on this movie is it's bland. It's not bad. It's not good.
Mm-hmm.
It's meh. A movie should never be meh. So it's really bad.
I think that we'll have to agree to disagree about Frederick March.
Well, we have more to come.
I've seen a lot of Frederick March drunk movies, and this is actually one of his better ones. And I go back and forth about Frederick March. He does some wonderful performances. He's wonderful in The Royal Family of Broadway, which he does a take on John Barrymore, and it's hysterical. It's a really, really early talkie and hard to sit through, but he's wonderful in it, and he's very handsome in it. Here's my main problem with The Star is Born, and it's the 37 Star is Born, which was rectified in 54, is we don't see anything in Vicky, Esther, which makes us believe can be a movie star. There's nothing about her that goes, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
This woman is going to be they make such a fuss over her after she's become a star. She gets the standing ovation when she wins the Oscar. And you're like, but you haven't shown me what she can do except for that one scene in the preview,
You're supposed to just take their word for it.
And and so that's why, so to me, that's a huge thing because I want to know why. What was it that Norman Maine saw in her? These ridiculous impressions she did at this party, that's not enough to make somebody believe in So,
yeah.
So that is a plot hole, I think, in this one, which I really don't appreciate.
And that is something I didn't like about it. I didn't see that I didn't feel any connection between them. None. I saw no reason for these two to get together.
it was rectified in 54 and it needed to be.
Yeah.
We need to see what Vicky has, which makes her the star that is going to be born.
And one important thing to note about this movie was all about acting.
Yeah.
Where the last two movies were about music.
The last three.
And Judy was kind of the in-between. The 1954 version was about musicals.
Yeah.
So this was acting, and then the 54 version was kind of a transition into the other two that were about just singers. So this was strictly acting.
Well, I have a theory.
Oh,
I have a theory about that reason. And I was actually talking about that after we watched it last night. I was like, wouldn't it be interesting? Because I watched the Bradley Cooper again last night.
Yeah.
Which is about music.
Yeah.
And because you have Lady Gaga too, you're going to have, yeah. But I'm like, wouldn't it be interesting if they did it again about film? And I don't think they can because there's no studio system anymore.
Very true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thing about A Star Is Born is she gets a contract. In this one, she gets a 7-year contract, and she's going nowhere in the 7-year contract until Norman Reigns sees her again at the studio commissary and realizes, oh my God, you're perfect.
Yeah.
For this to play opposite me in this film that we can't find the right actress for. I'm like, well, it took you that long to do that. I mean, hello. Since there's no longer a 7-year contract, a studio system, it's really hard to see. You know what I mean? She'd have to have a job immediately in a movie that was a huge hit, but then how would the progression happen? It's not like there's no more contract players. There's no more studio system for one to rise up in and one to fall and be fired. And so music makes more sense. Plus music is more immediate. I mean, we live in an American Idol world, I mean, celebrities still crash and burn, but it's messier because it can't just say, oh, their contract was canceled. It's why it's funny they call it a Hollywood story because you're right. It's all music. But music is much more, a talented musician is much more tangible than a talented actor. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Somebody blows the roof off a song, you can point to it and say, oh my God, that person is incredible. But with a film performance, I mean, you throw up Meryl Streep and Sophie's Choice and go, okay, but you know what I mean? It's less tangible. Yeah. So I think that's why it works better in music now and why it has been. Plus you also have these musical stars. You have Judy Garland, you have Barbra Streisand, you have Lady Gaga, all great actresses, but their primary meat and potatoes is their voice, their star. And it's something you can immediately point to and say, that's a star. Look at that performance. Yeah. There's something I want to say about the 1937 version. Yeah. Because it's 1937, it was quaint. It opens up where Janet Gaynor's character, Esther, is living at the farmhouse with her family, and her mother's upset because she's watching too many movies. And, yeah. And her grandmother, of course, is like stereotypical. The grandmother is the one that wants her to move forward. But Grandma is talking about, how her and her husband pioneers went for it and moved west. And of course, he was killed by those horrible engines. And it's like, it's 1937. They had to get that in there, of course. It's just amazing to think how close we were to the frontier times, that was actually a plot point. Exactly. Yeah. And then at the end, we don't hear from her family in any way whatsoever. Until Norma dies. Until at the very end, when she's ready to give up her career. And here comes the grandmother. Grandma marches into the mansion and says, you cannot. It's the grandmother ex machina. It's like Deus ex machina. Here comes the grandmother to save the day. No, that was what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about, and May Robeson, the great actress May Robeson, who was a wonderful actress in the 30s, an older actress, clearly. She was playing a grandmother. She was in Lady for a Day with Frank Capra. She's the original Apple Annie. She's a hoot. She's a great character actress. But yeah, it illustrates how antiquated this idea is. Not only the idea of Hollywood, you go out to your Hollywood, like I crossed the frontier and you make your dreams come true. And thank God. I mean, I'm glad we got rid of that trope. I'm glad we got rid of, the woman at the farm. But that's what the idea of Hollywood was, And what was kind of disturbing to me is before she leaves the farm, grandmother tells her, you're going to have to give things up. But that's what you do when you pursue your dreams. You sacrifice. And so at the end, after her husband killed himself, she basically said, I told you, you have to take a loss with what you get. And I'm like, that's cruel. Well, also the money she gave her was the money she was saving for her funeral. So that just kind of gives you the idea of, I mean, it's so, we laugh at it now because it seems so quaint and so antiquated. And it is compared, it was almost 100 years ago. That's in this movie is struggling for a while in a boarding house and grandma is sending her money to. Yeah, it's funny. And that's the way it was. And here's what I find fascinating too. And I've read a little bit about this, is when they, obviously, when the Judy Garland version came up, when the 54 version came up, Esther has no family.
Mm-hmm.
She's pretty much an orphan. I mean, they jettison the grandmother or the mother. Esther is, it's just so much to say about it. Do we want to say anything more about 37?
I think we're done with 37, but I was going to say, I don't think we see a family again until Gaga.
Yeah, you don't. You don't. Yeah, you don't.
Okay.
And I think there's a reason for that. 37 was a hit, a big hit, got a lot of Academy Award nominations.
Your beloved 1954.
So 1954 comes along, and I'm not going to go too deeply into the whole history with Judy. And Judy had done a radio version of A Star Is Born in the 40s, and she always wanted to play the role. But there was no way MGM was going to let her play the wife of an alcoholic, particularly as her reputation began to suffer in Hollywood. And you know, there's so much to say about 54.
She was Norman Maine.
Well, she's Norman Maine and she's Esther Blodgett.
Yeah.
She's both.
Yeah.
It's very meta. It's very meta. And so when Jodie made her comeback at the Palace, she made it first at the Palladium and then the Palace, and they were looking for a movie would have cemented the deal. So A Star Is Born was a natural fit. So they put together this incredible company of people. I mean, Moss Hart of Kaufman and Hart of, you know, You Can't Take It With You, wrote the screenplay. Harold Arlen and Ira Gershwin, you know, George Gershwin's brother, Ira Gershwin, who he wrote Porgy and Bess with, and Harold Arlen, who wrote Over the Rainbow, did the music. And George Cukor, because he wanted to direct Garland, agreed to come back and actually direct this A Star Is Born. So you have this incredible team of support for her here to do this. And yes, obviously you're going to make it a musical because it's Judy and because Judy has to sing. Otherwise, you know, that's the point. But what I find so amazing about it is what they did with the characters is Esther really is on her own here. She doesn't have a background. She's just this performing entity that comes upon Norman Maine.
That is one thing that I like that's interesting about it is because Esther isn't just...
No, I do too.
She's not just walking into Hollywood. She already has a career. She is a singer. She's not doing too shabby. I mean, she's not a star, but she's opening for Tommy Dorsey at the Coconut Grove. So they obviously are pretty good.
Well, Glenn Williams, but still,
Oh.
She doesn't, you know, that's her goal. She's already met her goal. She says someday she'll have a hit record on the hit parade. And Norman says to her, there's anything wrong with that. And she goes, I know it won't happen. And he says, no, the dream's not big enough. You know, and so she's the most unambitious of all the Esthers, doing just fine. She just wants to keep singing, you know, which is kind of wonderful. So it kind of goes in with this no name. I mean, the name Esther Blodgett, of course, is such a generic, ridiculous name, but it kind of goes with this no identity persona that they've created for her to be this performing entity. She's just there to sing. She's her talent. She doesn't need a background. She's her talent. I
like that she really is kind of happy with life at the beginning. She's in this band. She's the singer. She's friends with the band members. She seems content in her life.
Yeah, it was a really smart choice.
And he convinces her, you need more.
She doesn't need the baggage of a grandmother, a father, a mother, a past. We don't need to know her past. Her purpose is not her past. Her purpose is, as I said, this musical entity kind of dropped down from the heavens, put in front of Norman Maine, who then takes her on this ride.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a really interesting change. And I think it's a really smart change. I also think another very smart change that they make with this version of A Star Is Born is, as I said before, is Norman witnessing her talent. We see what he sees when she sings The Man That Got Away. And when we see that, we see, oh, when he says, you're a great singer, we believe, we've just seen it. So we know it. So it makes sense that she becomes this huge star because we've just seen it. We don't see that in the other one, the previous two. And I think that's a very important thing they put in there. And we see it in the subsequent ones as well.
And another important change that they made is James Mason. Because unlike the first two movies where the love interest, you're like, what does she see in this guy? There's no connection. It just happens. James Mason is charming.
He is charming.
He's a drunk, but he's charming. Swoons her, and you can see why.
She clearly is, yes. She's clearly enamored by him, but I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here because I do not find a sexual chemistry at all between Garland and Mason. In fact, that's one of the reasons, one of the things I have about, I don't get it. I don't get the connection. their original choice, Judy and Sid Luft, her husband, who produced A Star Is Born, wanted Cary Grant, the ultimate Norman Maine. And they wined and dined Cary Grant for months and months, and he would say yes, no, yes, no. And finally he said no. It could be for a number of reasons. Judy's reputation at this point was not great, so he heard the horror stories. He might not have wanted to go through that with her. Working with her was tough.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted a little more money than Warner Brothers wanted to pay. So they got James Mason.
And I'm not going to disagree with you. I didn't see a huge connection as far as chemistry between Mason and Garland. I agree with you, actually, now that you mention it.
Right.
But his character, at least, was written that way.
Yes, but you see the love. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
It's the love. There may not be this overheated sexual chemistry, but the love. I mean, you feel that love, that she has such love for him. I mean, she loves him so much in this. You can see that emotion. I mean, it's Judy Garland. There's always going to be emotion. There's a real emotional tug. But here's another thing, too, that's just kind of interesting. And if you notice, and just about Judy's Esther Blodgett, she can be very androgynous. I mean, when you think about it, the first time we see her, she's in a man's tuxedo, a modified man's tuxedo.
Yeah.
She does Swanee in the top hat and the pants. She does lose that long face, one of the famous cut numbers, which was rediscovered and put in the restoration, as a street urchin. So her hair is very short and very, it was the style at that particular time. But so there's an androgynous quality to Judy in A Star Is Born, which makes her almost every person, which is another brilliant thing, which also comes in line with, I'm getting so deep in the weeds here, which comes so deep in line with her not having a background. She not only doesn't have a background and anything specific to point to, she's every person. She's man, she's woman, she's child. And you really get that from her in A Star Is Born. And you get that incredible love between them. And also another reason why I think it's very interesting, because he gives her this opportunity to become a star. He puts himself out there and she gets this part and she becomes a star. She's therefore indebted to him. You don't get that sense of her being indebted to him in the 37 version. You know what I mean? They're just there's no drama to their relationship like there is with Mason and Garland. There's such heft to their relationship. There's such, it's just so deep. And I think that just moves me so much.
The movies are almost identical in so many ways, but so very different.
So many ways, but in really important ways, they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the character development and also in the performances. I mean, I'm not going to go into it because this isn't about, who should have won the Oscar or all that stuff. We know that she should have won, and we're going to leave it at that. But, she does give, Time Magazine said, the greatest one-woman performance in modern movie history. And I don't know, I defy anybody to watch Judy in that movie and not agree. I mean, it's an astounding performance. And I'm not going to go into all the drama about the overages and all the cuts and everything. There's so many wonderful books you can read about it. Ron Haver, who did the reconstruction in 1983, wrote a fabulous book called A Star Is Born. So if you want to hear all about the cuts and how they destroyed the movie before it was reconstructed, you can do that. Just her performance alone, even in the cut version, I remember seeing the cut version before the restored version, and it blew me away too. So that performance is it's for the ages. You can't touch it. You just can't touch it.
So let me say what I have to say, and you have to promise not to hurt me. I didn't like this movie, but I thought she did great. If this movie had stayed about a woman who made musicals, I would have been fine with it. What drove me crazy was it was like Glee. There were times like, sing me a song, and she'd break into song for no reason whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And I never liked any of those routines. I didn't like any of them.
You didn't like Someone at Last when she does the little performance for him?
Is that in the living room?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hated that. Absolutely hated that scene.
To cheer him up.
I didn't find any of those routines interesting at all, and it didn't seem real to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I disliked about it. If you chopped out all that, I would say this movie is outstanding.
Then you'd be a fan of the cut version.
Yeah. The version I saw had the still pictures in it. It was restored.
That's the restored version. Yeah,
okay, it was restored. What happened is that they only were able to restore some of the audio. So Parts of the movie you're watching a still and you're listening. And I can say large part of those that I thought I could see why they cut that. For instance, when he tells her, I'm bringing to Hollywood, and then he gets sent away on a...
Right.
She dropped the band and ends up having it. What's she doing? Waiting tables or something?
She waits tables and she does commercials. Yeah.
Until he returns. That really went unnecessary. But
it is necessary because it shows the struggle. There's a depiction of the struggle, the essence of the struggle and the achievement. Had he said, I'm going to make you a star and then show up the next day and here's your screen test, you don't get the struggle. The point of those scenes that were cut and that are put back in the restoration is you show, okay, she's just been abandoned, but she's not giving up. She even says, he showed me a side of myself I've never seen before, and he made me believe it too. So she suddenly realizes she does want more because of what she's going through. And then he does show up and, he gets off the movie set.
Very good point. Very good point. And I would buy it if after he went away and if she struggled on her own. But again, he comes back and basically helps her career.
Oh, and makes it on her own, you mean?
Yeah, if she makes it on her own.
That's what he basically comes back because then that's when the love story kicks in.
Well, I know.
I see what you're saying. See, to me, the scenes that were cut, and this is all speculation because the scenes no longer exist. What happened was Ron Haver found the original soundtrack. He had the soundtrack, but he didn't have the actual scenes. And so they had to use stills. And this was one of the very first times they ever did that. And they've done it a couple times since then, just to give you the idea. But what it did was it cut out parts of their, I feel, some of their character motivations and some of the, as I said, the essence of struggle that Hollywood is, because it just seems so easy without that. It seems so easy, like, he says, you're going to be a star, just like the other version. You're going to be a star. And then and then the next day she's got her screen test. And the next day she's a star.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I feel about that.
I want to go back to the first movie, Priced Hollywood, just to talk about the death of the character that's basically crashing and burning. In that movie, it was the director. He was not the love interest.
Right.
He shot himself in the stomach and he died. And then she went to her husband. So that kind of was a totally different ending there.
Which is a great scene, by the way they do the flash where he flashes his life back.
Oh my God, it was great.
Wasn't that wonderful?
I looked at Maurice, my husband, and I said, that was 1932 and that was brilliant.
With the sound, there was that great sound, and then suddenly his life is flashing back in front of his eyes and he shots and he falls over. Yeah, it's a fantastic.
It was gut-wrenching.
It's probably the best.
I was like, wow.
The best death scene out of all of them.
I forgot about that, but I was like really wowed by that. So then in the 1937 version, he drowns himself, when he realizes that she gives up her career to help him stay sober. And hearing that, he decides to drown himself so that she can continue with her career.
It's a sacrifice.
Yeah, he sacrifices himself. And that's where we end, where she says, hello, everybody. This is Mrs. Norman Maine. And the 1954 version is identical in that sense. Even the words, hello, everybody. This is Mrs. Norman Maine.
This is Mrs. Well, yeah, it's a hallmark of the movie. This is Mrs. Norman Maine.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I love that. What I love about the 37 version and the 54 version is you realize he's killing himself to save her.
Yeah.
Because in both films and in the Gaga film, by the way, there is a scene where he either overhears or he's actually in the Gaga version, he's told outright, you're destroying her.
Yeah.
You're no good for her. She cannot continue with you. So you see, he is actually sacrificing himself for her, which makes it all the more devastating. The first two Norman Maines walk into the ocean. James Mason walks into the ocean as Judy's singing It's a New World in the background. In the Gaga version, obviously, Bradley Cooper hangs himself while Allie's singing on stage Shallow, which is their song as well. It's a New World. So you get the real sense of this sacrifice. And that's why this is Mrs. Norman Maine is so important, because what she's saying is this man existed.
Yeah.
I am here because of this man.
Yeah.
And he gave up for me. Again, sacrifice. It's a story of sacrifice.
I've read complaints about that she's given him all the credit and making it about Maine instead of herself.
No, she's acknowledging this.
I disagree.
Yeah, she's acknowledging her debt to him.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that? It's incredible when we get in.
Yeah.
I find it so moving, and she's not. Yeah, It's just crazy. Now, of course, when Streisand did it, I don't know if are you ready to jump into 1975, 76?
Let's move to Streisand.
Streisand couldn't say this is Mrs. John Norman Howard, of course, because she's Barbara Streisand. She had to say Esther Hoffman Howard. So she added his name to hers.
Yes.
However, this is a hard one for me because, I love Streisand. I'm a card-carrying gay Streisand fanatic. But I have a lot of problems with this movie, always. And then I rewatched it again for the first time. It was always the one, whenever I would talk about Streisand's films, I would always be Funny Girl and The Way We Were and Prince of Tides. I always skipped over Star is Born because it's just like, oh, Star is Born. She smokes pot in The Star is Born. She swears in The Star. She doesn't.
Oh, it's very 70s.
I was so anti-Star is Born because it's her John Peters period. And, Streisand fanatics don't always like the John Peters period with the crazy hair and all that stuff. But watching it again, it's not that bad. I got to tell you, I was pleasantly surprised how much I liked it when I saw it after years and years and years. What do you think?
I have a confession to make. I didn't fulfill my obligation.
You didn't watch it?
I had to stop it at the 53-minute mark. I couldn't take another. I tried, and I just couldn't take another minute. I just couldn't. The music was unbearable. The acting was unbearable. It was just awful.
Wow, you really don't like it.
Oh, it was awful, awful, awful. Just,
I think that that's certainly a valid point.
I'm going to compare this to the most recent version with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. Give a reason why I didn't like this film. 30 minutes into the film, we have no story whatsoever. We have been shown repeatedly that John Norman Howard, Chris Christopherson's character, he's a drunk and a drug addict who acts erratically, destroys his concerts. It's like beat into our heads for almost 30 minutes, except for the scene where he goes to her house and they have pizza for breakfast.
Right.
Which I have issues. Well, first of all, let's say, in addition to reaching stardom, these have all been rags to riches stories. So when he shows up at her house and she has this beautiful 2-story apartment in Hollywood, I'm like...
Which, by the way, is right around the corner from me.
I know. I thought of you.
You can see the Magic Castle in the background. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of you when I saw that.
Yeah. Those are fabulous apartments, by the way.
I'm like, that's just bizarre. So it took 30 minutes to get there. So nothing is even happening. That compared to, I sat there and I timed the 2018 version.
Mm-hmm.
Within 3 minutes, we knew who Jackson Maine was. We knew he was a big star who clearly had an addiction problem.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have to watch this. First of all, Bradley Cooper's a much better singer than Christopher Christopherson's a good country singer. He was a terrible rock singer. So he did not work in that movie to me. Bradley Cooper sang well, but they didn't even make us sit through a whole concert. We only watched enough of it to understand he's trying to do a concert and he's not doing well because he's drunk.
Yeah.
Within 5 minutes, we then were introduced to Lady Gaga. We see that she's waiting tables and is doing music at a dive bar. So within 5 minutes, we learned who these people, we didn't know them personally, but we learned who these people were and we knew what the direction we were going. We had not reached that point in 30 minutes of the Streisand version.
Well, I think it took a little bit longer than 5 minutes in the Gaga version.
No, I timed it.
Did you really?
Yes. Because I went back and timed it because I'm like, this is so different.
Here's probably something that you didn't know, that John Peters produced both of them. John Peters was a producer on the Lady Gaga version. So that's kind of interesting because John Peters obviously is the force behind the Streisand version because Streisand was dating him at the time. He wanted to be a producer. So this is the thing about the Streisand version that bugged me immediately, besides her hair.
Oh, God, yes.
The thing about, and this was a lot of this was criticism, contemporary criticism of the film. I mean, the critics hated this film. Streisand had never gotten the reviews from critics that she got for A Star Is Born. They've always loved her. They always loved her. She was devastated by these reviews. But the movie was a huge, huge hit, so she didn't care.
Oh, yeah.
Huge financial hit.
I think it was number 2 that year.
That there's no way this Esther, now Esther Hoffman, because nobody would buy Esther Blodgett in 1975.
Yeah.
And this character of Esther Hoffman, from the moment we first see her, is way too self-assured and much, much too secure to still be unknown at this point in her life. She's just she's not there's no way she's a naive waif. And Streisand doesn't play her like a naive waif. You know, she has a little bit of a backstory. She was married before, and so maybe she put her career on hold for a bit. But here's what's really interesting. So that's a criticism of it. There's no way this Esther would be undiscovered and unacknowledged at this point in her life, in her career, with this voice. Streisand originally had the idea of switching the genders so that she would be the star at the beginning and a young man would be the up-and-comer. Now, I think that's fascinating because I totally buy Streisand as an already established star.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not with the drugs, though. So that's probably why they put the kibosh on that, because she's not going to do the drugs.
Yeah.
But Streisand is the confident, already established star and somebody coming up, you know, as her stars fall. I thought that was such a fascinating idea, but they didn't do it that way for obvious reasons. They went back to the original template. And of course, I know you don't like Chris Christopherson, but, you know, for a long time, they even met with Elvis.
Yeah, I heard that.
About doing the John Norman part, but he was just too far gone. And it would have thrown the balance off way too much. I couldn't imagine, you know, that would have been crazy. It would have been an amazing idea, but I think dramatically it wouldn't have worked. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying about it. And you know what I think is interesting about the Gaga one is that if you notice in the bar, it's Gaga who punches that guy. It's not Bradley Cooper's character, which is a great twist.
I love that.
Isn't that fantastic? I love that they did that because they showed this is not a shy and innocent Esther either. Even her name's not Esther anymore. But about the Streisand thing is it's interesting. You like, for me, the only saving grace of the Streisand thing is the music. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Evergreen.
I thought it was awful, and
even Evergreen, it won the Oscar.
I don't think I listened that far. I know the song Evergreen, and I do like it.
Yeah.
I heard a critique that one of the reasons why this movie failed was because nobody can buy Barbra Streisand as an up-and-coming star. And I disagree. Barbra Streisand's a good actress, and a good actor could pull that off. So I don't buy that as the reason.
I don't know if she could at this point in her career, though.
I love Barbra Streisand. I love her, and I love her singing.
I do, too. But let me tell you something. Even when she was starting out as Barbra Streisand, it took her like a year to get her first Broadway show. I mean, it happened that fast for her. So the idea, because no one's going to deny this talent, when she opens her mouth, they're like, come with me. Her own fame as when she started singing, not as an actress, because she couldn't get a job as an actress. When she started singing, she immediately started the rise. It was so fast. And within 3 years, she had her first Broadway show. Within 2 years, she had her first Broadway show.
Her singing is incredible.
Yeah.
None of the songs in this movie, I thought, complimented her voice. So
no,
I thought she sounded terrible.
I would agree with you. Because it's not her style.
I thought she sounded terrible. Anybody that doesn't think she can act needs to watch What's Up, Doc. She is a great actress.
We have to talk about What's Up, Doc.
We are going to do a show about What's Up, Doc.
We're going to do a show about What's Up, Doc, people.
Yes, it's coming.
And we'll do Bringing Up Baby and What's Up, Doc, but we'll keep going.
That's a good idea. The thing with it is I think Chris Christopherson's a good singer. I think Streisand's a good singer. Neither of them sang songs that complimented their voices.
No, that's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, you're right.
And as far as the attraction, Chris Christopherson was so far gone as an addict at the very beginning of this movie. He had no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And she just kept looking at him in disgust. And the next thing you know, he carries her into bed and there's this love scene where it looked like they were about to tongue. And I'm no prude, but I was like, back the camera up a little bit here.
Yeah.
I just didn't buy any of it. I mean, it made me, I hated him from the beginning. And the fact that she then became attracted to this loser in every way, shape, or form made me dislike her.
I don't hate Christopherson in it. I don't think he's strong enough for her. She needs a very strong leading man. That's just the truth with Barbra Streisand, especially when she's playing romantic. She needs someone who can match her. I don't think he can match her. I think he's good in the musical sequences, but you're right. It's not his forte and it's not her forte. I mean, I think that's why I was so resistant to A Star Is Born for so long because Barbra can't rock out. She just can't. When she tries to rock out, it's funny and not in a good way.
Yeah.
So when she does get the opportunity to sing a ballad like Evergreen, which is beautiful, She sings a song called Lost Inside of You, which is also a beautiful song. And the last song with One More Look at You is beautiful. Because that's what she does best. But when she starts to rock out in some of the stuff, you're just like, oh, come on, Barbara. This doesn't work.
It didn't work. No, none of the songs worked for her.
The head bops and the back. Yeah, Barbara, you're not a rocker. Go watch The Rose. Watch Bette Midler in The Rose. And that's exactly what, I mean, come on, Barbara.
It was so fake. Yeah.
It was strained. There's just a lot of things there are a lot of issues I have with the film. Yeah. And I hate to say it, but it's a vanity production
Totally.
for her. I mean, she was the producer. She denies it to this day. She had her battles with Frank Pearson, who was the quote unquote director, are legendary. He wrote a scathing article about working with her right before the film premiered. And she was devastated. This was hard for her. This was really the first time she was ever criticized the way she was. Well, God bless. I mean, you got to love her. It was a huge hit. She came back. She's a fabulous director in the things that she actually did direct. She realized that she has to direct herself because nobody else is going to do it. And The Star Is Born was her first taste of it. And there's a lot of problems with it.
Despite my problems with this movie, I'll never understand this. It was nominated for 4 Oscars and it swept the Golden Globes.
It did.
They won everything.
A lot of people liked it. I mean, it was a huge hit.
It grossed $80 million.
It was her biggest box office hit, which just kills me.
$80 million in 1976.
Yeah, it was huge. Teenage girls loved it. I remember my cousin loved A Star Is Born. She didn't know anything about Funny Girl, but boy, she loved A Star Is Born.
I also think a lot of that has to do with Chris Christopherson. You look at Chris Christopherson, he has that very hot 70s,
Well, that poster.
Skinny.
Jesus.
He's the poster boy of what people thought was hot in the 70s.
Did you ever see the Cary Grant sketch that they did on that, where she and I don't know who was the guy, but they're doing the poster, the famous poster from the film with him, bare chested, and she's up against his chest with her hand on it?
No.
The story of the sketches, the Cary Grant sketches, they've spilled super glue. And they can't get unstuck. And it's very funny because Cary Grant has the big afro wig that Streisand has. Yeah, it's so of its time. It's so 70s. I mean, I can appreciate it now for what she was trying to achieve. And because I do personally love the music. You got to watch the last scene.
A good friend of mine, and I'm talking to you, Philip, he thinks this is the best.
Does he really?
He loves this film.
Well, it has its moments. When she's singing, usually I love Woman in the Moon. It also has a scene where he sees her in the club. But the moment when she becomes a star in everybody's eyes is this incredible song called Queen Bee, which she sings at the concert. You probably didn't get to it.
No.
But, she doesn't do the famous This Is Mrs. John Norman Howard. She does Esther Hoffman Howard.
Yeah.
And she comes out and she sings a song that he has written and she's put music to, just like in the version we're going to talk about. And the song is called One More Look at You. And it's a fabulous song. And it's just her singing. It's like a one shot, which she says she regrets. She wish she had cut it more, but it's kind of like the ending of Funny Girl in that it's just the camera on her singing. And it's the most emotional part of the whole movie. And that's, for me, that's all I want, is that one scene. The rest of the movie, you can keep.
I want to toss out a few other things that jumped out at me. And these are minor because every movie has mistakes. But they jumped out at me because it just kind of validated everything else I felt about this movie. First of all, like I said, the apartment. She lived in this great apartment, which you know what that would cost in Hollywood. I kind of said, okay, maybe she got it in the divorce. So I was able to set that aside.
Well, it was 77, so it wasn't that much. Yeah.
Well, it probably still would have been a lot for 77. Well, Hollywood wasn't that nice a place to stay. Anyway.
No.
I don't remember their names. So I'm going to say Chris Christopherson walked in the door into her apartment with the pizza for breakfast.
Yeah.
She looks and she goes, "Oh, sausage?" And he goes, "No, pepperoni." You can look at a pepperoni pizza and know it's a pepperoni pizza, for God's sakes. Maurice and I both looked over and said, how can you mistake that? Again, small, but it was just, it was such a, and then the one
that's funny,
drove both of us nuts. And again, we both had the immediate same reaction. She and her 2 singers that she, was working with at the beginning of the film.
The Oreos. Yes,
the Oreos, which is just hysterical. 2 black women and Barbra Streisand, so they were called the Oreos.
Yeah.
They are doing the jingle for a cat food commercial.
Yeah, and she ruins it.
She ruins it, and because she keeps messing up, and she says, "I'm allergic to cats anyway." those girls would have read her. Instead, they were like, hee, yap.
Exactly. We just lost a job. Thank you. Oh, it's okay. How are you doing with John Norman Howard? Yeah, I agree with you. It's, when you live in Streisand land, that's what it is. And that's my main criticism of this film. As much as she might try to justify it, and she does, it is a vanity production. It's a huge, I get pissed off when people say Yentl was not a vanity production. Yentl, I don't want to get into Yentl, but Yentl is a wonderfully felt, deeply felt film. This is a vanity production. I'm sorry. There are more backlit shots of her, and she has all this theory about, because she wanted to feel like they were always on stage and blah, blah, blah. No, you looked fabulous, Barbara. That's why you put that in there.
I read 2 critiques. They said they didn't even know why Chris Christopherson even bothered to have the character.
I get some of the things she was trying to do. She was doing, it's a very feminist,
oh yeah,
if you will, slant. I mean, she's always in a suit, some form of a suit, kind of like I said, like Judy was always, it was kind of like an androgyny. With Barbara, it really wasn't. With Barbara, it was a definite statement about men and women. The scene where she's putting makeup on him in the bathtub, which, by the way, they did in the Bradley Cooper, which I remember the first time I saw that, I was shocked because that got a lot of criticism. The fact that she was putting makeup on him in the bathtub.
It was done a little different though.
Well, they did a little differently, but she's still putting makeup on him, and it's the fact that she was on top when they first had the first love scene, which I'm sure you turned it off by then.
No, I saw that first love scene.
She gets on top of him.
Yeah.
And that was a choice, because she was saying things about male and female power. And she also said that when they first asked her why she was remaking A Star is Born, because, Judy's version was so sublime, she said that she loved Judy's version, but that she feels like she has more to say about men and women in this day and age. And, in that movie, they just loved each other. But there's also, what about the hatred you feel for a person? And what about the anger and the fighting? And, her character even says she broke up with her first husband because he wouldn't fight. So you get this real aggression with her in this film. I think it flaws it. I think it makes it flawed.
I will say I definitely see the feminist slant on it.
Yeah.
I definitely see that. And the fact that she made her self-assured woman from the beginning.
Yeah.
But what bothers me about that is a self-assured person would never have gone to bed with this guy after being disgusted with him.
Yeah. I mean, talk about red flags.
No.
I mean, my God. How about when he leaves her at the stadium? Did you get that far when he leaves her at the stadium?
Yes. She's standing there in the parking lot.
Aren't they in Arizona or something? I thought they were in Arizona. How the hell did she get back to LA?
I don't know.
And yet she still goes out with him again. I mean, come on.
It is important to note, and I think I'm correct here. In this episode, at least it's not outwardly said that he killed himself.
That's the other thing. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's what I wanted to bring up. In every other version of A Star is Born, there's a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
The star sacrifices his life so his wife can have a career.
Right.
Not in this one. There's no indication that John Norman crashed his car on purpose, because there was no scene where he was told, you're destroying her career. You've ruined her. You've got to. In every other scene, there's like, you're ruining her. You've got to, somebody says it or he overhears it. That doesn't happen in this movie. So he just dies because he had a car accident, because he was drunk, because he was drinking. And I'm like, well, that's, where's the dramatic, where's like the gut punch in that,
I agree. It's just like, he's dead. Let's move on.
He's dead. I'm so glad you brought that up.
When we started talking about doing this, about 3 weeks ago, I watched a YouTube clip that just showed the car crash scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically her just standing over him after the car crash, holding him while he's dying, which he looked incredibly good for a guy that just had this horrible car accident.
Right.
I guess he got thrown from the car.
I think she's good in that scene too. I really like her in that scene.
It just shows them getting there after the crash. And I thought they must have shown that he decided to kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I actually looked into it to see for the show, I'm like, no, he just crashed.
Isn't that amazing? Well, he was like driving 160 miles an hour or something like that. I really wondered about that. And I thought, I guess this is the way it is now. It's just that his substance abuse eventually ends up killing him. So when I saw the Bradley Cooper version and I saw they brought that back in, I was like, yes, because that makes this is Mrs. Norman Howard, whatever.
Yes.
The last line so much more important, because she is acknowledging the sacrifice.
Yep. Let's move on to the Bradley Cooper.
So let's move on to the Bradley Cooper one, since that's a perfect lead in.
This movie is brilliant.
I think it's wonderful.
Brilliant. I love this movie.
I do too.
I've seen the Streisand version before, and I remember hating it. So when I sat down, I said, okay, clear your mind and let's do it. And that's why at 53 minutes, I'm like, oh no, this is even worse than I recall. That's why I had to stop. This version, I did the opposite. I said, okay, I love this film, but let's look at it from a different perspective. I loved it just as much.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I was hesitant to watch it because of, it's hard for me because I love the 54 version so much. But wow, it had me from the first frame. It did. I think it's interesting though. You and I have talked about this. You weren't a fan of Maestro, right? Or are you a fan of Maestro? Did we talk about that?
Oh, I don't think I saw it.
I'm not crazy about him in Maestro. I'm not crazy about him. I think he's very actory. He's acting with a capital A. I didn't get that in this. He just embodied this character. And I thought, so much so that he was kind of incoherent a lot. And I was asking myself, what did he say? Because he's just so into this character. And I just found him fantastic in this and so sad.
Yes.
And so it just heart-wrenching. And I found her, I know she's brilliant. And I knew she was going to be good as an actress because nobody can sing like that and be a lousy actress. The characters, I love the switches. Like I said before, I love the fact that it's her character who punches out the guy in the bar.
Yeah.
As opposed to him, because you were waiting for him to do it because he's, wherever he goes, there's destruction because of Chris Christopherson, right? And because that's pretty much the thing.
Yeah.
And she did it. And I thought, well, that's really a great twist. I love that. I love that they did that because they show what a feisty... And she also gives you a reason. Now, you could say the same thing about her character, like, really, you sing like that and nobody's discovered you? And she gives you the reason because people are saying, we don't like the way you look.
Oh, yeah, her father, for God's sakes. I wanted to throw something at the television.
Oh, how about Andrew Dice Clay? When I realized that was Andrew Dice Clay, I couldn't believe it.
I know. I was in shock.
But that's Hollywood. Yeah, we like the way you sing, but we don't like the way you look. So can you fix your nose and cut your hair? And yeah.
If you think of Simon Cowell, he didn't do this in America's Got Talent or British Got Talent, but when they had America Pop Idol, America's Pop Star, whatever it was called, he would kick people off the show because they didn't look good. Yeah. And his reasoning was, we're talking about a pop star here. You can't make it the way you look, which is cruel.
No, it's true.
Yeah, it's a totally different thing.
It's true. But I like that they put that in there. I like that they talked about that because you saw the reason why she was still struggling. It wasn't because nobody acknowledged her talent.
Yeah, she's not ugly, but she's certainly not star power look.
Yeah, well, but they didn't do that in the Streisand one, if you notice, because first of all, Barbara's not ugly by this long. I don't know why. When I get the whole Streisand ugly thing is ridiculous. She's not ugly. She's a beautiful woman. She's a striking woman, but she's unusual looking.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is you're too unusual looking, so we can't use you as a pop star. So I think with Gaga, I like that. I like the fact that you got the reason why she was struggling. I also like the fact that she wasn't immediately a success. She doesn't go on stage and sing Shallow. I don't know how that didn't make her an immediate success, but she started working with them and she worked with them and then she became a huge star.
There's two reasons why I love this movie that I felt the others didn't have. One was the relationship between her and Bradley Cooper. I bought more, and I'll explain in a minute. And number two, I felt her rise to stardom was more believable.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
As far as the relationship between she and Bradley Cooper, he was drunk when he met her, but he was still, it's hard for Bradley Cooper not to be charming, but it wasn't just his looks. He was charming. He was complimenting her. He was coherent enough that he had intelligent conversation. He was drunk, but he was intelligent enough to converse. The way he looked at her, he adored her.
Yeah.
That was all missing in all the other films.
I think that, yeah.
You could see why, okay, he's a drunk, but I like this guy. And especially after she punched him out, and they go to the they're just doing these simple everyday things. He takes her to the supermarket, he bandages up her arm in the parking lot.
Those were lovely, lovely touches.
These tender moments right from the beginning.
Lovely touches.
Yeah.
I really like that. I think that what I like about it is, to me, it harks back. First of all, she gives Judy a shout out in the very beginning when she sings the verse to Over the Rainbow, when she's leaving the club. And then I thought, thank you, Gaga. Thank you. I think that the relationship between them is much closer to the Garland Mason, because they do look at each other with tremendous love. There's tremendous love in there, which I don't get in the Streisand version at all. Does she says she loves John Norman Howard, but I don't know. She doesn't always act like it when she's throwing things around and breaking bottles and shit.
I don't see it in any of the versions. I do agree it was written in the 54 version, but they didn't have the attraction that these two had.
Well, no, I think we talked a little bit about the physical attraction. Yeah, I agree with you on that. But the love is there. I mean, the scenes there's a huge amount of love there. When Garland bails him out of jail in the 54s, I mean, it's heartbreaking because she just loves him so much. And I feel like with the Gaga thing, it was kind of a hark back to that. I just loved everything about it. I loved the fact that she didn't become a star immediately, that she worked for it, and then she eventually became it. And then I love the fact that they reintroduced the father, the parent. I thought that was a great addition. Mm-hmm. It didn't seem hokey.
It told us so much about her.
Told us a lot about her, yeah, which we didn't. She wasn't just this entity who dropped down from the heavens who was, she actually had a background, which I thought was amazing. And I also liked the fact that they had that character, Remy, who came in, who kind of, because there's managers like that in the music world. I mean, I think probably every manager is who just, they kind of controlled her life and took her life over and shut him out. And he was the one who said, "You're destroying her," right? He gave Bradley Cooper's character the talk, which propelled him to take his own life. So I thought, wow, that was a good addition.
And there's two powerful scenes in the movies where she's getting her big award, whether the Oscar, this one's the Grammy, all of them.
Yeah. Oh my God.
The male character, the love interest comes in and he ruins the whole moment for her.
He hits her.
This one was gut-wrenching.
It was.
It was. Oh my God. I'm like, this is supposed to be the best year of her life. And the thing is, she handles it well. I mean, he's walking up on stage drunk. She pulls him over, and it's so well done because she at least gets him to calm down.
Yeah.
And he's not fumbling all over the place. Her mistake was she continued her speech long enough for him to piss all over himself.
That was devastating. That was such a better choice than smacking her.
Yes.
I don't remember if in the Streisand version, if he hits her, and I don't think he does, but obviously in the 37 version and the 54 version, he accidentally smacks her. And that's the horrific moment. It is so much more horrific that he pees his pants.
Yes. And
on national television is so much more horrifying than a accidental hit. And you get that humiliation for her.
Oh, it was played beautifully.
It was.
She's sitting there making her speech, and she's wondering why is the audience gasping. And she turns around, and she immediately pulls her dress open to cover it up. But the damage is done.
So when Remy, the character of Remy, says she's a joke because of you, you get that horrification, that horror that he must have felt. Like, oh my God, I'm not just doing this to myself anymore. I'm doing it to her.
Yes. So
I must kill myself because I must set her free. You think, why couldn't he just leave? Well, she's got this taint on her. I mean, it's incredible. It was an incredible choice, a great change. Oh, brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant choice.
I also thought the suicide scene was better handled.
Oh, it was.
In the 37 version and the 54 version, he sacrifices himself. They show him on the beach. He jumps in the water, and then you see the robe being washed out.
Yeah.
When the tide comes in, and you know what happens. God, this just ripped my heart out.
Yeah, and you don't see anything but, him closing the garage door.
Well, you watch his face and him holding that belt.
Yeah.
And then he closes the garage door, and the beautiful touch was the dog outside the garage door, like looking in.
Yeah, that was sweet. Yeah, it's funny when I was watching it the first time and he was talking to the Ron Rifkin character when he's in rehab about trying to kill himself as a kid and how it didn't work. I thought, we've got some foreshadowing, I think. And sure enough, it was foreshadowed. And I thought it was gut-wrenching. And so wonderfully shot.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a home run.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really love it.
It's nearly flawless.
Yeah.
I have one complaint about this movie. They dropped the F-bomb too often.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a potty mouth, but it was like, fuckity, fuck, fuck, fuck. And
Oh my God, yeah.
it was like, it was so distracting. It just didn't seem realistic. I mean,
I know. I looked over at Michael, at my friend Michael, when we were watching it, and I was like, you hate this, don't you? Because he doesn't even like it once or twice. And he said, I can't. It was really too much.
and I've known people that talk like that, but every single character, they were all talking to each other that way.
Yeah, it was like it wasn't Andrew Dice Clay even. I don't even think he didn't say it at all.
No, he's probably the one person that didn't swear.
Isn't that funny? But yeah, that bothered me. I was like, oh, come on. I mean, I know you can talk this way, but come on, it's a movie. I mean, that was the way it was. It lessened it as the movie went on, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe it didn't. How about Sam Elliott too? I mean, there's a new character that was fantastic.
He was great.
The additions they made were so smart, and the changes they made were so smart, but they stuck to the skeleton. And to me, I felt it really harked back to the 54 version. So if we're ranking them, obviously the 54 version will always be my favorite version. I think I just think it's a brilliant, brilliant film. Not just Judy. I think the direction, I think the music, I think, yes, it's long, but it's an investment. And for me, it's always an investment that pays off. What would your number one be?
Okay, I'll go through my list. Number one, Gaga, hands down, no ifs, ands, or buts.
So the most recent one's the one.
Most recent one.
Okay, so let's do this and let's go back and forth.
Okay.
My number two is What Price Hollywood with Constance Bennett and Lowell Sherman. The embryonic Star is Born.
My number two is 1954, Judy Garland.
Okay, so your one is Gaga, two is Garland. My number three is... Oh, wait a minute. My number two is Gaga.
I was surprised. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't think of it for a minute. So, okay, I changed that. One is 54. The second one is Gaga. My third is What Price Hollywood. I'm assuming that's probably yours too, right?
Yeah, I go with my number one is Gaga. My number two is Judy Garland. Mm-hmm. And my number three is What Price Hollywood. Definitely.
Yeah, I think so. So both of us. So Streisand's is number 4 for both of us.
No, 37 is number 4.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about 37. Yeah, number 4. Yeah, me too.
And then rock bottom, in my opinion, shouldn't even be on the page, is the 1976 Barbra Streisand version.
Yeah.
Since Barbara owns it, I think the best thing she could do is lock it in her safe and forget it existed.
Well, she redid it.
Yeah, I know.
Just as The Way We Were, she put in some scenes, and which she can do. She's the producer. She owns it.
Yeah.
It's let her do it, and she thinks it improves it. But I don't know. It's not as bad as I remember it being when I saw it again, because it became mythically bad in my head. But yeah, definitely not the best. And I love the fact that the new version, the Gaga version, I really hope is the last one because it probably isn't.
They should stop while they're ahead.
But that's the thing about this story. It never fails. It goes on. It's a mythic Hollywood story, even though it's not even Hollywood anymore. For some reason, this story just inspires people because you think about it. It's pretty, it's elemental.
Yeah.
It's rise and fall. It's about addiction. It's everything.
It's a very simple story.
It is a very simple story, but it really hits home because it deals with really basic, strong human emotions. So it's fun.
I enjoyed watching them all, even the struggle through. I feel like I fell on my duties here. I couldn't do it.
Not so much fun to sit through some of them, but.
And that's rare. My husband and I watch bad movies because we enjoy bad movies sometimes, but this is not fun bad.
If you're ever going to watch it, I would just watch the last scene, or don't. You don't have to. I love With One More Look at You.
I did plan to go back and watch certain scenes just to see how those particular scenes were done.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was fun.
It was fun. Look for either Tony and I on social media. We'd like to hear what you think of our choices.
I'm Tony-Maeda.com. You got to put the dash in. Tony-Maeda.com, and on Facebook is Tony Maeda, and on Instagram is TCMTOO.
And I am BradShreve.com. Most of my social media is at the Brad Shreve. Just go to my website and you can link to all my socials. We want to hear what you think.
Yeah, let us know. Thanks, everybody.
Do you enjoy going to Hollywood? Well, of course you do. And Tony and I would like you to do something for us and more important, for other podcast listeners out there. Go to Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts and rate and review this show. A 5-star would be especially nice. That way, when others are looking for a new show, they'll see ours and see those reviews, and they will stop and listen. And boy, that will make their day. It will be much appreciated. Thank you for being with us.